I never thought owning a snow removal business would land me in the middle of a war with the most vindictive HOA president in Minnesota. But here I was, holding a certified letter threatening to fine me $500 because their driveways weren't cleared fast enough during a blizzard. My name is Thomas Xavier, and I had been running Xavier Snow Removal Services for 8 years in the suburbs of Minneapolis. We specialized in residential snow removal, and over time, I had built up contracts with 3 different homeowners associations in the area. The work was steady, the pay was decent, and until 6 months ago, everything had been running smoothly. That was before Patricia Henderson took over as president of the Oak Ridge Estates, HOA. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in late January, delivered by a smug-looking courier who waited for my signature like he was serving me divorce papers. I stood in the doorway of my modest office, which was really just a converted garage attached to my house, reading the contents with growing disbelief. This is a formal notice that Xavier Snow Removal Services has violated Section 12.4 of the service agreement with Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. During the snowstorm of January 18, 2026, your company failed to clear all driveways and common areas within the contractually obligated 4-hour window. As a result, you are hereby fined $500 to be deducted from your next payment. I read it 3 times, feeling my blood pressure rise with each pass. The storm they were referring to had dumped 18 inches of heavy, wet snow on Minneapolis in the span of 6 hours. My crew and I had worked for 14 hours straight, starting at 3 in the morning, to clear every single property in Oak Ridge Estates. We had brought in every piece of equipment we owned and even rented 2 additional plows. The 4-hour window they were citing was meant for normal snowfall of 6 inches or less, not a major winter storm. I grabbed my phone and dialed Patricia Henderson's number, which unfortunately I had memorized by this point. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Thomas, I was wondering when you would call. Patricia, what is this fine about? We worked through the night during that storm. Every driveway was cleared, every sidewalk was salted. We went above and beyond. The contract states 4 hours, Thomas. I have multiple residents who documented that their driveways were not accessible until after 7 in the morning. That is simply unacceptable. It was a major blizzard. The contract has provisions for severe weather events that extend the timeline." I reviewed the contract with our attorney, and he agrees that the language is ambiguous at best. Therefore, the board has decided to interpret it in favor of the association. The fine stands. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my temper in check. "Patricia, be reasonable." My crew worked themselves to exhaustion. We prioritized the main roads and emergency access routes first, then moved to individual properties. That's standard procedure. Standard procedure is not good enough for Oak Ridge Estates. We expect premium service, and we pay premium prices for it. She paused, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. "Consider this a warning. Any future delays will result in additional fines and potentially termination of the contract. You can't be serious." I am always serious when it comes to maintaining property values in this community. "Good day, Thomas." She hung up before I could respond. I stood there holding my phone, staring at it like it might offer some explanation for what had just happened. Patricia Henderson had been a thorn in my side since taking over the HOA presidency in August. She was one of those people who seemed to derive genuine pleasure from enforcing rules and finding violations where none existed. Before her tenure, I had worked with the Oak Ridge Estates HOA for 5 years without a single complaint. My wife, Emma, walked into the office carrying 2 cups of coffee. She took one look at my face and frowned. "What happened?" "Patricia happened." I showed her the letter. "She's fining us $500 for the response time during that massive storm last week." Emma read the letter, her expression darkening. "This is ridiculous. You were out there all night. I barely saw you for 2 days." "I know. But she's claiming the contract doesn't account for severe weather, which is complete nonsense. We specifically added those clauses 3 years ago after that ice storm. Can you fight this?" I pulled out my copy of the contract and flipped through the pages until I found the relevant section. Here, Section 12.4, Subsection C. In the event of severe weather conditions exceeding 6 inches of snowfall within a 6-hour period, response times may be extended to a reasonable duration based on the severity of conditions and available resources. That storm was literally textbook severe weather. Then she doesn't have a leg to stand on. She's banking on the word reasonable being subjective, and knowing Patricia, she'll drag this out just to make my life difficult. Emma set down her coffee cup and crossed her arms. "So what are you going to do?" That was the question. I had 48 homes in Oak Ridge Estates under contract, which represented about 30% of my annual revenue. Losing that contract would hurt, but it wouldn't sink my business. I had 2 other HOAs that I serviced, plus a handful of commercial properties and individual residential clients. But I hated the idea of letting Patricia Henderson bully me into accepting an unfair fine. I'm going to request a hearing with the full HOA board. If I can present the facts to the other members, maybe they'll overrule her. Emma looked skeptical. Has anyone ever successfully challenged one of her decisions? There's a first time for everything. I spent the next 2 days preparing my case. I gathered weather reports from the National Weather Service showing the storm's intensity, time-stamped photos from my crew documenting their progress throughout the night, and testimonials from several Oak Ridge Estates residents thanking us for our hard work. I also consulted with my own attorney, a guy named Robert Chen, who had helped me draft the original contract. Robert reviewed everything and nodded approvingly. "You've got a solid case. The severe weather clause is pretty explicit. Unless they can prove your response was genuinely unreasonable given the circumstances, they don't have grounds for this fine. Patricia seems to think they do. Patricia Henderson is known for being litigious and difficult. I've dealt with her on behalf of other clients. She likes to throw her weight around, but she usually backs down when someone actually challenges her with facts." That gave me some hope. The HOA board meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening at 7 o'clock in the Oak Ridge Estates Community Center. I arrived 15 minutes early with my documentation organized in a neat folder and a flash drive containing the photos and weather data. The community center was a modest building near the neighborhood entrance, with a large meeting room that held about 50 people. By the time the meeting started, maybe 20 residents had shown up, most of them there to complain about various issues. Patricia sat at the head table with 4 other board members: Gerald Foster, the vice president, Linda Morrison, the treasurer, Keith Young, the secretary, and Brenda Watson, a member at large. Patricia called the meeting to order with all the gravitas of someone chairing a session of Congress. She was in her early 50s, with perfectly styled blonde hair, designer glasses, and the kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes. She wore a burgundy blazer over a white blouse, and her nails were manicured to sharp points that she frequently tapped on the table for emphasis. "We have quite a bit of business to cover tonight," Patricia began, "so let's move through the agenda efficiently. First item, approval of last month's minutes." They spent 20 minutes on mundane HOA business, reviewing landscaping bids, and discussing whether to repaint the community center trim. I sat in the audience, waiting for my opportunity to speak. Finally, Patricia reached the relevant agenda item. Next, we need to address the snow removal service violations from the January 18th storm. As you all know, we issued a fine to Xavier Snow Removal Services for failure to meet contractual obligations. Mr. Xavier has requested an opportunity to address the board. She looked directly at me with what I can only describe as predatory anticipation. Mr. Xavier, you have 5 minutes. I stood and walked to the front of the room, connecting my flash drive to the projector. Thank you for hearing me out. I want to address the fine issued for our response to the January 18th storm, which I believe was issued in error. I pulled up the weather data on the screen. According to the National Weather Service, that storm dropped 18 inches of snow between midnight and 6 a.m. Wind gusts exceeded 35 miles per hour, creating significant drifting. Visibility was near zero at times. This was classified as a severe winter storm, with the city issuing a snow emergency and advising residents to stay off the roads. I clicked to the next slide showing our contract. Our service agreement includes a severe weather clause, specifically Section 12.4, subsection C, which allows for extended response times during storms exceeding 6 inches of snowfall within 6 hours. This storm clearly qualified. Your contract says reasonable response time, Patricia interrupted. 7 hours is not reasonable. It absolutely is, given the circumstances. Let me show you what my crew accomplished that night. I pulled up the time-stamped photos. We started plowing at 3 a.m., beginning with the main roads to ensure emergency vehicle access. By 4:30, all primary roads were passable. By 6 a.m., we had completed the first pass on all driveways. By 7 a.m., we had done a second pass and were starting on sidewalks. By 9 a.m., everything was cleared and salted. I looked at each board member in turn. We had 4 plows running continuously, plus 2 skid steers for the sidewalks and tight areas. We brought in every available crew member, some on their day off. We worked 14 hours straight. Several other snow removal companies in the area didn't even start service until after sunrise because the conditions were too dangerous. Gerald Foster, the vice president, leaned forward. He was a retired engineer in his 60s with a no-nonsense demeanor. Do you have documentation of when you started work? Yes, sir. I have fuel logs showing when we filled up the trucks at 2:45 a.m., GPS data from our fleet tracking system showing vehicle movements starting at 3 a.m., and these photos which are all time-stamped. I pulled up a detailed timeline. I also have testimonials from 10 Oak Ridge Estates residents specifically thanking us for our work that night. Linda Morrison, the treasurer, raised her hand. I was one of those residents. I sent Thomas an email that morning thanking him. My driveway was cleared by 6:30, and I was able to get to work on time. I thought they did an excellent job given the conditions. Patricia's smile became strained. Linda, your personal experience doesn't negate the contractual obligations. But it does speak to whether their response was reasonable, Linda countered. I think we need to seriously consider whether this fine is justified. Keith Young nodded. I agree. The weather was terrible that night. I remember looking out my window at 4 a.m. and seeing their plows working. They were out there in dangerous conditions doing their job. Patricia tapped her nails on the table sharply. The contract specifies 4 hours. They took 7. That is a violation, regardless of weather conditions. If we don't enforce our contracts, what message does that send? It sends the message that we're reasonable people who understand that sometimes circumstances require flexibility, Gerald said. His tone was measured but firm. Thomas, in your professional opinion, was a 4-hour response time physically possible during that storm? No, sir. Not without compromising safety or quality. Even the city's snow emergency crews were running hours behind schedule. If we had tried to rush through the job to meet an arbitrary deadline, we would have done subpar work that might have led to accidents or injuries. We prioritized doing the job right over doing it fast. Brenda Watson spoke up for the first time. She was a woman in her 40s who usually stayed quiet during meetings. Patricia, I think we should vote on rescinding this fine. I don't see how we can justify it given the evidence Mr. Xavier has presented. Patricia's expression turned cold. As president, I have the authority to issue fines for contract violations. That authority was granted to me by this board. But the full board can overrule that decision, Gerald said. I move that we rescind the $500 fine issued to Xavier Snow Removal Services. I second, Linda said immediately. Patricia looked like she had bitten into a lemon. Very well. All in favor. Gerald, Linda, Keith, and Brenda all raised their hands. Patricia was the only one voting against the motion. The motion passes, Gerald announced. The fine is rescinded. Thomas, please accept our apologies for this misunderstanding. I nodded, feeling a surge of relief. Thank you. I appreciate the board's fairness. Patricia gathered her papers with sharp, angry movements. This meeting is adjourned, she snapped and walked out of the room before anyone could say another word. The other board members looked embarrassed. Gerald approached me as I was packing up my materials. I apologize for Patricia's behavior. She's been very aggressive lately about enforcing every rule to the letter. Some of us are getting concerned about it. I appreciate you all listening to the facts, I said. You did good work during that storm. We all know it. Don't let Patricia's attitude make you think otherwise. I drove home feeling vindicated but uneasy. I had won this battle, but I had a sinking feeling that Patricia Henderson was not the type to let things go. Emma was still awake when I got home, working on her laptop at the kitchen table. How did it go? She asked. The board overruled her. The fine is rescinded. That's great. Yeah, but Patricia looked like she wanted to murder me. I don't think this is over. I was right. 2 weeks later, another letter arrived from the HOA. This one cited 3 separate violations. A plow allegedly damaging a mailbox post, salt staining on a driveway, and my crew supposedly starting work before the contracted time of 6 a.m., which apparently violated the neighborhood's noise ordinance. The mailbox claim was bogus. The post had been leaning for months, long before we ever touched it. I had photos from earlier in the season showing its condition. The salt staining was normal winter, where that happened to every driveway, and it specifically wasn't covered under our liability, because it was an unavoidable consequence of using salt. And the noise ordinance complaint was rich considering they had previously demanded we start earlier to ensure driveways were clear before residents left for work. Each violation came with a $250 fine, totaling $750. I called Gerald Foster directly this time, bypassing Patricia. Gerald, I just received another letter with more fines. This is getting ridiculous. Gerald sighed heavily. I know. Patricia has been on a warpath since the last meeting. She's issuing violations to half the contractors working in the neighborhood. The landscaping company quit last week. What? They got tired of her constant complaints and threats, just dropped the contract and walked away. I'm starting to understand why. Look, Thomas, I'm going to be straight with you. Several of us on the board are very unhappy with how Patricia is running things. We're actually discussing calling a special election to remove her from the presidency. But that takes time, and in the meanwhile, she's still got the authority to make life difficult for everyone. So what am I supposed to do? Just eat these fines. Challenge them at the next board meeting. We'll back you up again. But I'd be lying if I said this was going to get better anytime soon. That conversation planted a seed in my mind. I spent the weekend reviewing all my contracts, looking at the actual revenue versus the hassle factor. Oak Ridge Estates was my largest single contract, but it was also becoming the most problematic. The other two HOAs I worked with were straightforward and professional. They paid on time, communicated clearly, and understood that winter weather was unpredictable. On Monday morning, I called Robert Chen again. I'm thinking about terminating the Oak Ridge Estates contract. What are my options? Robert pulled up the contract on his computer. Let me check the termination clause. Okay, here it is. Either party can terminate with 60 days written notice without cause. However, there's a provision that if the client is in breach of the payment terms or acting in bad faith, you can terminate with 30 days notice. Does constantly issuing unfounded fines constitute bad faith? Potentially, especially if you can document a pattern of behavior, but you'd want to be careful about how you phrase it. The safer route is just to use the standard 60-day notice. 60 days means I'd be stuck with them through most of the rest of winter. True, but it also protects you from any claims that you breached the contract. If you terminate early and they take you to court, you could end up liable for damages. I thought about it. February through March were typically the heaviest months for snow in Minneapolis. The idea of dealing with Patricia Henderson's harassment for another 2 months made me want to throw my phone through a window. But Robert was right about the legal risks. Then I had another thought. What if they breach the contract first? Like if they don't pay me? Then you'd have grounds for immediate termination. Why? Are they behind on payments? No, but they're threatening to deduct these fines from my next payment. If they do that without proper justification, doesn't that constitute non-payment? Robert was quiet for a moment. That's actually a good point. If they unilaterally deduct money from your payment without a valid basis, you could argue they're in breach. But you'd need to clearly document that the fines are unfounded and that you've disputed them. I'm disputing them right now. I'm putting it in writing. Then do that. Send a certified letter to the HOA stating that you dispute all recent fines as without merit, and that any deduction from your payments will be considered a breach of contract. That creates a paper trail. I drafted the letter immediately and had it sent via certified mail and email. I also requested another hearing with the board to address the new fines, which was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, winter continued. We got hit with 3 more significant snowfalls in February, each requiring full service at all my properties. Every time I sent my crew to Oak Ridge Estates, I felt my stress levels spike. I started having my guys take extra photos and videos, documenting every aspect of the work. If Patricia was going to keep coming after me, I wanted an airtight record of everything we did. The second board meeting was even more contentious than the first. Patricia brought printed photos of the allegedly damaged mailbox, the salt-stained driveway, and a signed complaint from a resident about early morning noise. I countered with my own evidence. Photos showing the mailbox's pre-existing damage, documentation that salt staining was excluded from liability per the contract, and a copy of an email from Patricia herself from the previous year requesting that we start work earlier to accommodate resident schedules. The board once again sided with me, voting 4-1 to rescind the fines. Patricia was visibly furious, her face flushed, and her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "This board is failing in its duty to hold contractors accountable," she said. "I will be documenting this for the association's records. And I'll be documenting your pattern of issuing baseless fines," I replied, surprising myself with my own boldness. "This is harassment, plain and simple." Patricia stood up so quickly her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "How dare you? I am protecting the interests of this community. You're abusing your authority to target people who don't bow to your every whim. There's a difference." Gerald intervened before things could escalate further. "Let's all take a breath. Thomas, you've made your point. Patricia, I think we need to have a separate discussion about contractor relations. This meeting is adjourned." I left the community center feeling angry and exhausted. This was taking up far too much of my time and mental energy. I had a business to run, and I was spending hours every week dealing with Patricia Henderson's vendetta. The breaking point came 3 days later. My crew was clearing Oak Ridge Estates after a moderate snowfall, maybe 5 inches. Nothing severe, well within our normal response parameters. I was out with them, operating one of the plows myself. We were working our way through the development methodically, and everything was going smoothly until we reached Patricia Henderson's house. Her driveway was on our route, and we cleared it just like we did everyone else's. But as we were finishing up, Patricia came storming out of her house in a bathrobe and boots, waving her arms. "Stop, stop right there," she yelled. I climbed down from the plow cab. "Is there a problem? You damaged my driveway." She pointed at the asphalt, where there were a few scrape marks from the plow blade. "Look at this. You've ruined it." I examined the marks. They were superficial, the kind of light scraping that occurred when metal met pavement. They would fade after one summer of sun exposure. "Patricia, those are minor marks. That's normal wear from snow removal." "Normal? There's nothing normal about damaging private property. This is going to cost hundreds of dollars to repair. Your driveway is fine. These marks don't affect its function or integrity. I want you off my property. Right now. We have a contract to clear your driveway." "I don't care about the contract. Get out." One of my crew members, a guy named Jake who had been with me for 4 years, walked over. "Boss, we've got about 20 more houses to do. Should we just move on?" Patricia rounded on him. "Don't you dare continue working in this neighborhood. I'm calling an emergency board meeting to terminate your contract immediately." I felt something snap inside me. I was done. Completely and utterly done. "You know what, Patricia? You don't need to call an emergency meeting. I quit." She blinked, apparently not expecting that response. "What? I'm terminating the contract. Effective immediately. You can find yourself another snow removal company." "You can't do that. The contract requires 60 days notice." "The contract also requires the client to act in good faith, which you've repeatedly failed to do. You've issued multiple baseless fines, made false accusations, and now you're interfering with my crew's ability to do their work. That's breach of contract on your end, which allows me to terminate immediately." I pulled out my phone and called Robert Chen, putting him on speaker. "Robert, I'm here with Patricia Henderson. I'm formally terminating the Oak Ridge Estates contract for cause, effective immediately, based on the client's pattern of bad faith conduct and interference with service delivery. Can you confirm that's within my rights?" Robert's voice came through clearly. "Yes, based on what you've documented, you have grounds for immediate termination. Make sure you send written notice within 24 hours, but verbal notice is sufficient to end service." Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "This is unacceptable. We have a contract." "Had a contract," I corrected. "Jake, pack it up. We're done here." "But we haven't finished the neighborhood," Jake said. "Not our problem anymore." Patricia's face turned an alarming shade of red. "You can't just leave. There are still driveways that need clearing. Find someone else to do it. I'm sure you'll manage." I climbed back into my plow and my crew followed my lead. We drove out of Oak Ridge Estates in a convoy, leaving behind about 20 unfinished driveways and a sputtering Patricia Henderson standing in her bathrobe in the snow. The satisfaction lasted for about an hour before the reality of what I had done sank in. I had just walked away from 30% of my annual revenue in a moment of anger. Yes, Patricia had pushed me to the breaking point, but was it worth the financial hit? Emma was surprisingly supportive when I told her. "You made the right call," she said. "That woman was making you miserable. No amount of money is worth that kind of stress." "We're going to have to tighten the budget," I warned her. "We'll manage. You've got other clients, and you can probably pick up more work to replace Oak Ridge Estates." She was right about that. Word spread quickly through the contractor community about what had happened. The landscaping company that had quit reached out to me, and we compared notes about Patricia's behavior. Turned out, she had been harassing them with similar tactics, threatening fines and finding violations where none existed. "She's going to have trouble finding any reputable companies to work with," the landscaping company owner told me. "Everyone knows she's impossible to deal with." That prediction proved accurate faster than I expected. The next morning, I got a call from Gerald Foster. "Thomas, I need to apologize on behalf of the entire board. We should have reined Patricia in months ago. What she did yesterday was completely out of line." "I appreciate that, Gerald. I'm calling because the board held an emergency meeting last night and we voted to remove Patricia as president. She's also being asked to resign from the board entirely." I sat up straighter. "Really? Really? Her behavior has become untenable. We've had multiple contractors quit, residents are filing complaints, and yesterday's incident was the final straw. Linda Morrison is taking over as acting president." "That's good to hear, but it doesn't change my decision. I'm not coming back." "I understand, but I had to at least tell you. We're also probably going to have trouble finding a new snow removal company on short notice. Most companies are already booked for the season." "That's not my problem anymore, Gerald. I'm sorry, but Patricia burned that bridge." "I know. I just wanted you to know that we recognize she was wrong." "Good luck with everything, Thomas." After he hung up, I felt a mixture of vindication and concern. I was glad the board had finally taken action against Patricia, but Gerald was right about one thing. Finding a snow removal company mid-season was nearly impossible. All the reputable companies had full schedules. Oak Ridge Estates was probably going to struggle for the rest of the winter. That became evident over the next few weeks. Minneapolis got hit with several more snowstorms, and I heard through the grapevine that Oak Ridge Estates was scrambling. They apparently tried to hire 3 different companies, but 2 declined outright once they heard about Patricia's reputation. And the third was a small operation that could only handle partial service. My regular clients kept me busy enough that I wasn't hurting too badly from the lost revenue. I picked up a few more commercial properties and several individual residential clients who had heard about my reputation for reliability. The business was leaner than before, but we were managing. Then, about a month after I left Oak Ridge Estates, I got a call from Linda Morrison. "Thomas, I know you said you weren't interested in coming back, but I wanted to reach out one more time. We're really struggling here. The company we hired can only cover about half the neighborhood, and residents are getting frustrated. Some of them can't get out of their driveways for days after a storm. Linda, I appreciate the call, but I meant what I said. The stress of dealing with Patricia's harassment wasn't worth it. Patricia's gone. She resigned from the board completely." We've also rewritten the contractor policies to prevent this kind of situation from happening again. No more fines without a full board vote, and we've added a contractor bill of rights that protects service providers from harassment. That was interesting. A contractor bill of rights. Yes. It includes protection from retaliation, clear dispute resolution procedures, and limits on what board members can do without full board approval. We realized that giving the president too much unilateral authority was a mistake. That's a good step, but I'm still not interested. I've moved on. I understand. I had to try. For what it's worth, several residents have asked me to pass along their apologies. They know Patricia treated you unfairly, and they appreciate everything you did for the community over the years. After Linda hung up, Emma looked at me thoughtfully. Are you sure you don't want to reconsider? It sounds like they've actually learned something. I'm sure. Even if Patricia's gone, I don't trust that situation. What if they elect someone else who's just like her? I'd rather work with clients who appreciate what I do from the start. February turned into March, and the snow kept falling. Minnesota winters are relentless, and 2026 was proving to be particularly brutal. Every storm brought new stories about Oak Ridge Estate's struggles. The partial service company they had hired quit after Patricia apparently called them at 2 in the morning demanding to know why her driveway wasn't cleared yet. Even though she was no longer president, she was still a resident and still causing problems. The situation came to a head during the massive March storm. It was one of those late-season blizzards that catches everyone off guard, dumping over 2 feet of snow in less than 12 hours. The entire city ground to a halt. Schools closed, businesses sent people home early, and the governor declared a state of emergency. My crew worked around the clock servicing our contracts. We had learned our systems from years of experience, and we moved through our properties with practiced efficiency. By the second day after the storm, all our clients were cleared and salted. Oak Ridge Estates was not so lucky. I heard from one of my crew members who had a friend living in the development that the neighborhood was completely buried. No one had plowed anything. Residents were trapped in their homes, unable to get to work or even to the store. The partial service company had apparently looked at the storm forecast, decided it wasn't worth the hassle, and just didn't show up. The friends sent photos. It was bad. Cars were buried up to their windows. Driveways were indistinguishable from yards. The main roads through the development were impassable. It looked like a scene from a disaster movie. Should we help them? Jake asked me. I know we don't have a contract anymore, but those people are really stuck. I wrestled with that question. On one hand, I wasn't responsible for Oak Ridge Estates anymore. They had made their choice when they allowed Patricia to harass me for months. On the other hand, there were decent people living there who had nothing to do with Patricia's behavior. People like Linda Morrison and Gerald Foster, who had tried to do the right thing. Before I could decide, my phone rang. It was Linda Morrison again, and this time she sounded desperate. Thomas, I know I have no right to ask this, but we need help. The company we hired didn't show up, and we can't get anyone else. Half the neighborhood can't get out. We have a woman who needs to get to medical appointments and a man who's supposed to be at work at the hospital. This is a genuine emergency. What about Patricia? I asked. Is she still causing problems? Patricia is being dealt with. She violated HOA rules by harassing contractors even after being removed from the board. We're actually in the process of taking legal action against her for interference with association business. Legal action. The board voted unanimously to sue her for damages caused by her behavior. We've lost 3 contractors because of her, and the association has had to pay premium rates to get any service at all. We're seeking compensation, and a restraining order preventing her from contacting contractors directly. That was more serious than I expected. Wow. We're done playing around. Her actions have put the entire community at risk. But right now, Thomas, I'm not calling about Patricia. I'm calling because we have residents who genuinely need help, and you're the only person who can provide it. Name your price. Whatever you want, we'll pay it. I looked out my office window at my fleet of plows, all recently returned from servicing our other properties. We had the capacity to help. The question was whether I wanted to. I need to think about it. Give me an hour. I called Robert Chen and explained the situation. If I take this as a one-time emergency service, am I opening myself up to any liability? Not if you draw up a clear contract stating it's a one-time service with no ongoing obligation. In fact, you could probably charge a significant premium given the emergency circumstances and the history of problems. How significant? For emergency snow removal after a major storm, with no existing contract and difficult history, you could easily charge double or triple your normal rates. I thought about that. Triple rates for one massive job would actually make up for a good portion of the revenue I had lost by walking away from the contract, and it would help people who genuinely needed it. But there was also a part of me that wanted them to understand what they had lost when they allowed Patricia to drive me away. They needed to see that good contractors don't grow on trees and that burning bridges has consequences. I called Linda back. I'll do it, but here are my terms. This is a one-time emergency service contract. I'm charging triple my normal rates, payment in full upfront before we start work. I also want a written apology from the HOA board acknowledging that the previous fines and violations were without merit. And I want a guarantee in writing that Patricia Henderson will not contact me or any of my crew members for any reason. There was a pause. Triple rates. That's my price. You said name it. I'm naming it. Okay, I need to call an emergency board meeting, but I think we can agree to those terms. Can you give me an hour? You've got 1 hour. After that, my crews are going home for the day. 50 minutes later, Linda called back. We accept your terms. I'm emailing you the board's written apology and the agreement regarding Patricia right now. How do you want payment? Wire transfer to my business account. I'll send you the details. How fast can you get here once payment clears? Give me 2 hours to mobilize equipment and crew. We'll start with the main roads and work our way through the development. The payment cleared within 30 minutes. It was a substantial amount, enough to make me smile despite the headache I knew was coming. I called in my entire crew, including a couple of guys who had the day off. Emergency job, overtime pay, and there's a bonus in it for everyone when we're done. We rolled into Oak Ridge Estates at 3 in the afternoon, a convoy of 4 plow trucks and 2 skid steers. The neighborhood looked even worse in person than in the photos. Snow was piled everywhere, and several residents came out of their houses when they saw us arrive, looking relieved. Jake shook his head. This is going to take all night. Then we work all night. Let's get started. We fell into our familiar rhythm, clearing the main thoroughfares first to establish access routes, then systematically working through each street. It was hard, exhausting work. The snow was heavy and deep, requiring multiple passes in some areas. We had to be careful around buried cars and hidden obstacles. Round 7 p.m., I was taking a break to eat a sandwich when I saw a familiar figure approaching. Patricia Henderson, bundled in a designer winter coat, marched up to my truck. I need to talk to you, she demanded. I held up my hand. Stop right there. You're not allowed to talk to me. That was part of the agreement. This is ridiculous. I live here, and I have a right to know when my driveway will be cleared. Your driveway will be cleared when we get to it, just like everyone else's. Now please leave before I call the police for harassment." "Harassment? You're the one who abandoned this neighborhood. I terminated a contract because of your abusive behavior. There's a difference." A car pulled up and Linda Morrison got out. She looked exhausted. "Patricia, what are you doing?" "I'm trying to find out when these people are going to clear my driveway. I have places to be." "Your driveway will be cleared in due course, but you need to leave Thomas alone. We have a board order prohibiting you from contacting contractors." "That order is absurd. I have rights as a resident, and Thomas has rights as a contractor. You've caused enough damage, Patricia. Go home." Patricia's face flushed with anger. "This is your fault, Linda. You and the rest of the board have turned this neighborhood against me. I've lived here for 12 years. And in the 6 months you were HOA president, you drove away 3 contractors, racked up thousands in legal fees, and made life miserable for everyone around you. The lawsuit the board is filing against you is very real, and if you keep harassing Thomas, we'll add a violation of the restraining agreement to it. You can't sue me for doing my job. You weren't doing your job. You were abusing your authority. There's a mountain of evidence, including documented false accusations, harassment, and interference with association business. Our attorney says we have an excellent case." Patricia sputtered for a moment, then turned and stalked back toward her house, muttering under her breath. Linda turned to me apologetically. "I'm so sorry. She's been like this with everyone since being removed from the board. It's fine. I'm used to it at this point. But Linda, you need to understand something. This is exactly why I won't come back for regular service. Even with Patricia off the board, she's still here, still causing problems. I can't have my crew subjected to that kind of harassment every time we come to work." "I understand. For what it's worth, we're moving forward with the lawsuit. Our attorney thinks we can get a court order prohibiting her from interfering with contractors or HOA business. I hope it works out, but my decision stands." We worked through the night and into the next morning, finally finishing around 8 a.m. Every driveway was cleared, every sidewalk was salted, and the main roads were in better shape than they had been before the storm. My crew was exhausted but satisfied with a job well done. Linda Morrison met me at the community center as we were packing up. "Thomas, I don't know how to thank you. You saved us. You paid me well for it. That's thanks enough. It's more than that. You came through when we were in a genuine crisis even after everything that happened. That says a lot about your character. I helped because there were people who needed it, not because of the HOA. The people in this neighborhood deserve reliable service, and it's not their fault the association hired a nightmare as president." Linda handed me an envelope. "This is from several residents. They wanted to write their own thank you notes and apologies for how you were treated." I took the envelope, surprised. They didn't have to do that. They wanted to. A lot of us feel terrible about what happened. We should have stood up to Patricia sooner. I nodded. For what it's worth, Gerald and the others did eventually stand up to her. It just took time. Too much time. We lost a good contractor because we were slow to act. I shook hands with Linda and climbed into my truck. As I drove out of Oak Ridge Estates, I looked in the rearview mirror at the freshly cleared streets. Despite everything, there was a satisfaction in knowing I had helped people who needed it. Even if I never worked for that HOA again, at least I had ended things on my terms. The lawsuit against Patricia Henderson moved forward over the following months. The HOA board hired a law firm that specialized in association disputes, and they built a case documenting Patricia's pattern of harassment, false accusations, and interference with contractors. I was asked to provide testimony and evidence, which I did willingly. The case went to mediation in April. I wasn't present, but Robert Chen kept me updated on the proceedings. Patricia initially refused to settle, claiming she had done nothing wrong. But when faced with the mountain of evidence and testimony from multiple contractors and residents, her attorney apparently advised her that fighting the case would be expensive and futile. The final settlement required Patricia to pay $15,000 to the HOA for damages caused by her actions, agree to a permanent restraining order preventing her from contacting contractors working in the neighborhood or serving on the HOA board in any capacity, and issue written apologies to the 3 contractors she had driven away. I received her apology letter in May. It was clearly written by her attorney, full of legal language and lacking any genuine remorse. But it was an acknowledgement that she had been wrong, and that was something. The bigger victory came when I heard from Linda Morrison that Patricia and her husband had decided to sell their house and move out of Oak Ridge Estates. Apparently, the social backlash from her behavior and the lawsuit had made staying untenable. She had alienated most of her neighbors, and the court costs and settlement had been financially damaging. I almost feel bad for her, Linda told me over the phone. Almost. But then, I remember how much damage she caused and how many people she hurt with her need to control everything. Some people can't handle power, I said. They let it go to their heads and forget they're supposed to be serving a community, not ruling over it. The new board has been wonderful. We've implemented all kinds of reforms to prevent another Patricia situation. Checks and balances, transparency requirements, contractor protections. It's like night and day. That's good to hear. Are you sure we can't convince you to come back? We'd love to have you as our snow removal contractor again. I smiled. I appreciate the offer, Linda, but I'm happy with my current client list. I've learned that sometimes it's better to work with fewer clients who treat you well than more clients who don't. I understand. Well, the offer stands if you ever change your mind. After hanging up, I reflected on the whole experience. It had been one of the most stressful periods of my professional life, but it had also taught me valuable lessons. I learned the importance of standing up for myself and my business, even when it meant walking away from significant revenue. I learned that sometimes the best response to an unreasonable person is simply to refuse to engage. And I learned that my reputation and the quality of my work spoke for themselves. My business thrived in the months following my departure from Oak Ridge Estates. The story of how I had stood up to an abusive HOA president spread through the contractor community, and I started getting calls from other potential clients who appreciated my professionalism and backbone. I hired 2 additional crew members to handle the increased workload. Emma and I celebrated our anniversary in June, and over dinner, she raised her glass in a toast to standing up for yourself, even when it's scary. To having a wife who supports me even when I walk away from 30% of my income, I countered. You made the right call. You're happier now than you've been in a year. She was right. The stress that had been weighing on me during those months of dealing with Patricia had lifted. I enjoyed going to work again, servicing clients who appreciated what I did and treated me with respect. In August, I got an unexpected call from Gerald Foster. Thomas, I wanted to update you on something. The board took your situation so seriously that we've been working with the City Council on proposed legislation to protect contractors from HOA harassment. It's called the Contractor Fair Treatment Act. Really. It establishes clear standards for how HOAs can interact with contractors, limits on fines and penalties, and creates an arbitration process for disputes. We're using what happened with Patricia as the case study for why this legislation is needed. That's incredible. You standing up to her and documenting everything so thoroughly gave us the ammunition we needed to push for real change. We're hoping the city council will pass it this fall. The legislation did pass in October, and while it couldn't undo what had happened to me, it provided protections for other contractors dealing with difficult HOAs. I was invited to the signing ceremony, where the mayor acknowledged the role my case had played in highlighting the need for reform. Standing there in City Hall, shaking hands with council members and other contractors who had faced similar issues, I felt a sense of closure. What had started as a frustrating conflict with an unreasonable HOA president had turned into something positive that would help protect others. Winter returned as it always does in Minnesota, and my crews prepared for another season of snow removal. We had our routes planned, our equipment maintained, and our systems refined. I had contracts with 6 different HOAs now, all of them professional and reasonable. My business was stronger than it had ever been. In December, I was clearing a commercial property when I saw a familiar vehicle drive by. It was Patricia Henderson, driving slowly through the parking lot. She looked older somehow, worn down. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw something in her expression that might have been regret. Or maybe just bitterness. It was hard to tell. She drove on without stopping, and I went back to work. Whatever demons Patricia was wrestling with were her own to deal with. I had my own business to run, my own life to live. That evening I came home to find Emma cooking dinner and our 2 dogs wrestling on the living room floor. Normal, peaceful, uncomplicated. I had learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a life and a business that doesn't need the approval or cooperation of people who don't respect you. I never went back to Oak Ridge Estates, and I never regretted that decision. The neighborhood found a new snow removal company, one that was apparently very happy with how the reformed board operated. Linda Morrison and I stayed in occasional contact, and she kept me updated on the positive changes in the community. Patricia Henderson moved to a different suburb, and I heard through the grapevine that she tried to run for HOA president there too. She lost badly, with her reputation apparently preceding her. Some people never learn. As for me, I continued to build Xavier Snow Removal Services into a company I was proud of. We earned a reputation for reliability, professionalism, and standing up for ourselves when necessary. Other contractors reached out to share their own horror stories about difficult clients, and I always gave them the same advice. Document everything, know your rights, and never be afraid to walk away from a situation that isn't serving you. The lawsuit money that Patricia had to pay to Oak Ridge Estates was used to improve the community center and fund snow removal services for elderly residents who couldn't afford private contractors. In a way, her harassment had led to something positive for the community she had claimed to be protecting. On particularly snowy days, when my crew and I were working long hours to keep our clients' properties clear, I sometimes thought about that day I drove out of Oak Ridge Estates for what I thought would be the last time. The satisfaction of standing up to Patricia, of refusing to be bullied, remained one of my proudest professional moments. Running a business is about more than just making money. It's about maintaining your integrity, protecting your employees, and choosing clients who value what you do. I learned that lesson the hard way, but I learned it well. And every winter since, when the snow falls and my crews head out into the cold, I'm grateful that we're working for people who appreciate our efforts and treat us with respect. That's worth more than any HOA contract, no matter how lucrative. The story of my conflict with Patricia Henderson became something of a legend in the Minneapolis contractor community. New business owners would sometimes reach out to ask for advice on dealing with difficult clients, and I was always happy to share what I had learned. Stand your ground, document everything, know your worth, and never be afraid to fire a client who doesn't respect you. Years later, I still run Xavier snow removal services, and the business continues to grow. We've expanded into year-round property maintenance, offering landscaping and lawn care in the summer months. My crew has grown from the handful of guys who walked out of Oak Ridge Estates with me to a team of 15 skilled professionals who know they're valued and protected. Emma eventually went back to school and got her business degree, and she now manages the financial side of the company. Together, we've built something we're both proud of, a business that serves its clients well but never at the expense of our own dignity or well-being. I drive past Oak Ridge Estates sometimes, when my route takes me that way. The neighborhood looks nice, the streets well-maintained, the homes well-kept. It's a reminder that communities can recover from bad leadership, that reform is possible when people are willing to stand up and demand better. And every time I see those streets, I remember the lesson I learned. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away, even when it costs you in the short term. Because in the long term, your integrity and peace of mind are worth more than any contract. That's the story of how I got fined by an HOA for snow removal taking too long, canceled their contract, and left them stranded in the worst winter storm of the year. It's a story about standing up to bullies, about the importance of documentation and knowing your rights, and about building a business based on mutual respect, rather than fear and intimidation. And it's a story with a happy ending, at least for me and for the other contractors who benefited from the reforms that followed. As for Patricia Henderson, wherever she is now, I hope she learned something from the experience. But either way, it's not my problem anymore. I've got snow to plow, clients to serve, and a business to run. And I'm doing all of it on my own terms, with people who treat me and my crew with the respect we deserve. That's all any contractor can ask for. And it's exactly what I fought for that day. I drove out of Oak Ridge Estates with my head held high and my integrity intact.